Okay, on my previous presentation, I was talking about the war in Afghanistan. Due to the U.S.-led invasion of 2001, President Bush and his administration, which I will not go into politics about how he invaded Iraq. I'm not going to say if it was illegal or not, or if it was wrongdoing. All I'm going to say is that we're there now, and that we have to win the war in order people to say, well, we should leave. Well, there's no way that you would leave, because Sunni and Shia jihadists and insurgencies would take over the country of Iraq, and it would be complete chaos. We're already in the country, so we have to finish out the mission. I know a lot of Americans would disagree with that. That's my personal opinion. The insurgency begins. So after the invasion of 2003, Donald Rumsfeld, again, I will not get into politics, but Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and the rest of the Bush administration didn't want to realize that there was an insurgency. Mr. Bremer, who was a UN convoy, didn't want to admit there was an insurgency. So after the invasion of U.S. troops in 2003, looting started to start. And you have to realize when you invade Iraq, they dismantled the entire military and the entire police force because they believed they had connections with the Ba'athist Party and connections with Saddam Hussein. So right there was the beginning of the insurgency. You have thousands and thousands of unemployed Iraqi men with no jobs and nowhere to go. And you have an occupational force that's non-Muslim. So that's an insurgency right there. Rumsfeld denies that there's a growing insurgency. He calls them thugs, pretty much. They're just a bunch of thugs trying to cause chaos. But the truth is, the insurgency is starting to brew. And Al-Qaeda was not in Iraq before the U.S.-led invasion. There is no proof to that, and President Dick Cheney just admitted that. So there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq due to the U.S.-led invasion. It wasn't until after the invasion that Al-Qaeda actually started fluctuating in Iraq. Zarqawi. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, in my opinion, was one of the most deadliest men on fighting the war on terror. He was a Jordanian thug that embraced radical Islam in prison. He was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and he was known for the embassy bombings on the Jordanian embassy and the U.S. UN buildings that were bombed. And that was in early 2004. And America and the Bush administration couldn't believe this. They thought they were bringing peace and democracy to this country, but they didn't realize that insurgency would start. He was a Sunni, and his organization was part of Al-Qaeda. He got pretty much told by Osama bin Laden. He talked to Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and he pretty much got permission to fight against the U.S. with Al-Qaeda and the money, the funding, the weapons, everything funded by Al-Qaeda. There's also belief that Saudi Arabia funded Abu Musab because of the Sunni regime and his Sunni insurgency who were killing innocent Shia population of Iraq. So after he started the civil war in Iraq, which was due to the bombing of the Golden Mosque in Samarra, that's when the real fighting started to start. But it wasn't until the death of 4 U.S. contractors in Fallujah in 2004 which really caused the real insurgency. This is when President Bush realized that there was a real Sunni insurgency and there was really Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And you'll see in a picture right here, this is young Iraqi boys hanging one of the bodies of one of the Blackwater security contractors in Iraq. He was completely burned and dismantled. 2 Al-Qaeda fighters rolled up onto the convoy, and they had no bulletproof armor, and they killed the entire convoy. Recruitment for Al-Qaeda was rampant in Iraq. It especially became rampant due to the Abu Ghraib pictures in Iraq in 2004, where they showed extreme brutality among U.S. forces against Iraqi civilians and Iraqi prisoners that weren't charged with any crime. Sunni jihadists are coming throughout the Muslim world to fight alongside the Jihadist Brotherhood, just like it was up to 60,000 fighters influxed through the rest of the Muslim world in the 1980s to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. It was happening now in Iraq. And I think if the Bush administration would have realized how much of a threat Al-Qaeda was and Muslim foreign fighters were, they would have understood how complex this war was. Iraqi cities under Zarqawi's control. So at this time, Abu Zarqawi had complete control of so many Iraqi cities. The defining moment of the U.S. forces was take the Iraqi cities back. He had control of Tel Afar, Baghdad, Samarra. He had control of Fallujah. They were all controlled under Zarqawi. Sunnis were now the outsiders as the Shia government was put in place. 60% of Iraq is Shia. There was a 20% minority, but during Saddam's rule, he was a Sunni. He had complete control and complete power among the Sunnis. So for the years of Saddam's control, the Shias always felt like the outsiders. Well, now the Sunnis did. The Sunnis are the main acceptors and the main gravitators toward radical Al-Qaeda Islam, because it supports it's a mostly Sunni organization. This gave Zakari power. Zakari had plenty of power, and the Sunni jihadists attacked the Shia population, creating a Shia insurgency that would fight him in the Civil War of '06 when it first started. The Civil War. This was when most of the people turned against Iraq. Most of the American population turned against the Iraq War in '06 due to the Civil War, because there were just so many U.S. casualties. There was rampant headlines of hundreds of people dying in suicide bombings every day. The economy, the basic human benefits such as water and electricity also drove the insurgency. A lot of water, a lot of electricity weren't being given to the Iraqi people due to the Americans not having complete control over the country. So that also drove the insurgency to the highest point. Just the basic humanitarian needs that a country needs to work weren't being given to the Iraqi people. And February 6, the Golden Mosque was bombed by Al-Qaeda and a Sunni Iraq insurgent group. This caused about a year and a half civil war until the surge of '07. The Mahdi army was now put into place. Muqtada al-Sadr, a top Shia cleric and a supporter of Iran, started an insurgency known as the Shia militia that was supported by Iran, was given funds by Iran, weapons by Iran. Pretty much they're an organization that's pretty much came from Iran. So now that they were fighting, there was a complete civil war in Iraq. So like I was saying, Sunni jihadists, Al-Qaeda, were fighting against the Shias. They were fighting against Shia militias that Muqtada al-Sadr and other Shia clerics were owning. There was torture camps throughout Iraq against Sunni men, against Shia men. Iraqis couldn't get basic health services just due to their ethnic and religious beliefs. Muqtada al-Sadr is a Shiite cleric who has a tough anti-American stance. He's against the occupation of his homeland. That's why there's such strong backing by Iran, because they're also an American enemy in some Americans' eyes. He was a key factor in inciting a civil war against the Sunni population. So after the bombing of the Golden Mosque, he would go into Sunni mosques, he would go into Sunni hospitals, he would go to Sunni parts of neighborhoods of Baghdad and through Iraq, and he would just have entire hit squads kill hundreds and hundreds of the Sunni population, no matter women, children, or men. Muqtada al-Sadr is seen as the most powerful man in Iraq, because due to there being the mostly Shiite government that is controlled and funded and supported by Iran, he has so many connections in the police force, he has so many connections in the Iraqi military, he has so many connections in the Iraqi government, that he definitely is one of the most powerful men in Iraq. He has since toned down his actions due to signing a peace treaty with American forces.